Hello and welcome back. So I did a lot of thinking about the mobile app and what we're going to do with it and how we're going to go over all of the intermediate to advanced topics of Xamarin. And I started going back to Old Faithful, making a weather app that really lets us get into custom views. I made a little list. Let me pull it up. So it lets us go over, we already did this, the setting up with using the MVVM architecture, but we can make our different pages and pass information between pages and all that good stuff. We can go over like a new user setup, which is, could include a walkthrough for the app, and it shows them how to add their first city for weather. We could use location based on GPS. We have to make API calls, which is definitely what we want. We can use persistent data storage like app settings and SQLite database app settings for things like when they choose user settings like Fahrenheit versus Celsius, or we can give them an option to change the app theme, and then we can store that in app settings. Otherwise, you have SQLite database for like history of weather information, things like that. Could be a little bit overkill, but it would serve two purposes. One, we could see about, making a SQLite database, which definitely uses dependency service. Um, the other one is we don't really have to make so many API calls. Every time we want to look at history, we can look at our recent history, whatever we've stored, and if they want more, then we can make the API call. Um, Custom views, I mean, pretty much everything we're going to make a custom view component for, and that way we can get away from all the default components. And yeah, I have some other things here, but I'm not sure really what to do with them yet. This you'll see this in the structure for that eShopOnContainers project. We'll take a look into that after we get what we want to get done. So without further ado on that, let's get into creating the screens in the UI. And so when we create these screens, we'll put placeholders in for, like the weather and city and whatever. Then once we have those in and we're comfortable with how the screens are constructed, then we can register mock services to deliver that content data. We can then all we have to do is re-register our real services when we're ready, and that way we don't have to keep making calls to the API every single time we test. We can just feed it mock data, and so that's beneficial. So we can go through that. Once we get this screens created, the services done, well, the mock services at least, then we can go into the custom views, which I'm very excited about. We'll do some basic custom views, and we'll also do custom renderers, which will render the views differently on each platform. Ultimately, want them to probably look the same, but once you get into the canvas on Android, or using the core animation layers, or what they're called, on iOS, then we'll have to use custom renderers. So two different approaches to achieve the same result based on platform. So let's get started. We can start with our screens. We have three so far. Homepage, I just use that name because that's what we already had. We're just going to redo our homepage. We didn't get very far in it anyway. We have a settings page and a splash page. Splash page I'm not terribly concerned about right now. Mainly homepage and settings page. So the settings page, we're going to let them add or edit cities. I'm not sure if I want to. I mean, this can stay on the settings page as well. But I think I might also want to let them add cities right on the home page. So we'll see when we get there. This is where they can change Fahrenheit versus Celsius or select an app theme, and we can maybe even show, once they select, we just change everything temporarily and show them how it looks, and they can save it or apply it or something. So yeah, I think it's a great app. There's already a bunch of weather apps out there. We're not trying to make an app to sell. I'm just making an app because it's fun, and I think it's a good exercise, and hopefully people can learn some things from it. So I'm going to move this back over here so I can reference my notes, and we will get into it. So I have our project open. I have homepage open, and we're going to actually delete everything in here because we actually don't want any of it anymore. So we don't want the list view. We don't want the label. We do want to keep our ViewModel base setup. That's going to auto-wire our ViewModel. So we have our stack layout. We have to think about how we want it to look. And then we could also go into our view models folder and open up a home page view model. We'll make that a little smaller. And so we don't really have menu items anymore. We can get rid of that. And we're not going to instantiate menu items. So we have our blank homepage view model. So what we'll do is construct our view with hard-coded values. Then we'll come into the view model and replace those hard-coded values with binded properties, and then we can go from there. So the first thing we want, I don't think we need that header yet, since we only really have one other page, and that's the settings page. So we're going to want a couple things. So we have our stack layout. This fills the entire page, and so we're going to need a label, and its text can say the city name. So we'll just use Chicago, Illinois for now, I guess. Chicago, Illinois, and we'll get into styles here in a moment. So label Chicago, Illinois. Right under that, maybe we'll do a label text, and that'll be like 50 degrees. We'll have to use a symbol for the degrees. That'll be 50, and then maybe under that we'll show like a stack layout for the forecast. So, and then maybe we'll make a custom stack layout that we can just give data to it and it'll just display it on its own. But for now, stack layout and text. No, I'm so sorry. Dang it. Stack layouts don't have text, but stack layout. And in here, let's make this a scroll view so that we can scroll the forecast if it's 10 day, 16 day, whatever the forecast ends up being. So scroll view and give it its one child. So stack layout. And so in this stack layout, we can start adding like a stacked list, or just could be a list view, but then you wouldn't want to use a scroll view. You don't want to put a scrollable object in another scrollable object, so you don't really want to do that. But we can make our list, our forecast list. So let's just make a comment here for now. Forecast list. And that can fill up the page. At the bottom, we could have like a toolbar, but definitely at the top right, I think we're going to want that settings cog, kind of like the icon. So in here, we're going to throw these into a stack layout, and orientation will be horizontal so that it goes horizontal. So orientation horizontal. Then we need another stack layout to go back to vertical for these two items. And the reason we're nesting this way is so we can kind of structure. We could also use a grid, which would work just fine. In fact, we might start with a grid anyway. Let's move to a grid, and let me tell you why. So once you make API requests, you're going to want to show some kind of loader while you're doing network activity, and it'll be like a spinner or something. If you want to stack a loader on top of the view, you need some kind of layout that allows for it, and stack layouts don't really. So instead of stack layout, stack layout, stack layout, like we have here, which would be great if we didn't need a loader, we should make a grid. So let's change this to a grid, and that'll change that parent stack layout to a grid. And we'll go ahead and say vertical options, fill and expand, and that's fine. And so in here we need to make some column, or at least some row definitions. I don't think we need column definitions. So to make those, you would use grid.row definitions, and in here we can say row definition, and rows have heights. So height, so our first one will say, let's just make it 60, and that will contain all of what we were going to do here. Oh, we are going to need columns. That's okay. So all of what we were going to do here, and then maybe the rest can just go in a scroll view. It can be for the scroll view. So row definition, height, and we'll just say take up all the rest. Okay, then we can apply like a background color here if we want, and then that ends up being a header anyway, which is okay. So we have this. Let's make 2 columns. So grid.column definitions and column definition, and these have widths. So our first one, we want to have just everything that's left from our second one, because we're going to put that settings cog on the far right. And so let's say column definition width, and we can give this one 60. So we'll have that 60 by 60 square at the top right, and then everything else will take up the screen on the left and the bottom. So that looks okay. So from here, we can still, we don't really need this anymore. So we can get rid of that first parent one here, and we can put this stack layout right in. So grid.row will be 0. You don't have to include that because that's assumed. And then grid.column is also 0, so we don't have to put that either, but we're going to. Grid.column 0. So those are assumed. If you didn't put those, they would be placed there by default. But then we have this, we're going to have an image, so we'll have to find an icon for that. And so this will be grid.row is 1 and grid.column is 1. Nope, grid.row is still 0 because we want it at the top right. So grid.row is 0 and grid.column is 1. Okay, we don't really need to open the tag like that. So this thing, we want it to be like aspect fit, and maybe give it some margins because right now it's 60 by 60. We don't need that. Maybe we'll keep it 40 by 40. So if we put a 10 on each side, then that'll center it and put it, 10 on left, 10 on right is 20, and that leaves 40, and then 10 on top and bottom is 20, and that leaves 40. So that looks fine. We are going to want to put some kind of gesture recognizer on this, so we can do that now. So we will open the tag, and then we can say image.gesture recognizers, tap gesture recognizer command, and binding, and this will be settings command. So this settings command we are going to put into our view controller. If we don't, nothing happens. It doesn't break. So that's good and bad. It's good because it doesn't crash our app. It's bad because if you don't remember to put this in your view controller, it could be hard to kind of track down. But let's go ahead and put it in now. So home page view model. Up at the top, we need a public I command, and you can press Alt Enter to bring in the import. And we'll call it settings command again. And then you can use like lambda equal and then greater than and say new command. And we already have Xamarin Forms imported, so that'll work. You can just open this for now. And in here, we need to put an anonymous method. And so what this will do is when settings icon is tapped, we will go to settings page. We don't have that yet, so we're going to leave this how it is, but we know where to go. So we have that. That's in the top right. This is just on the top. It's stacked. We are going to want to apply styles to it, which we will. Okay, so we have this at the top, and we might, well, I guess we don't really want the weather to be in the top because that would be very small. We want the weather to be kind of large, actually. So let's change this a little. So since we have label in here by itself, we don't really need this stack layout. So let's take this label out for a second, and we'll put it below the image because it will be below the image, and so that's easier to find when you go back. So a stack layout with just a label in it is pretty much unnecessary. It could have a benefit in that if we want to do like a center vertical, centering it vertically in a stack layout, I think is cheaper than center text vertically. Like vertical text alignment, setting that to center, I think is maybe a little more expensive, but we might not have to worry about that. So let's go ahead and erase, get rid of this stack layout. This defaults to grid row 0, grid column 0, but let's just put it here anyway to avoid confusion. And grid.column equals 0. And so that's fine. If we press Control KD, it will realign and reformat your code. And so now what we have is Chicago, Illinois at the top left. We have this image at the top right. We have a label with just text being 50. We're going to make this rather large. And then we have a scroll view. We need to put this in its row and column. So row will be 1 and column span will be 2. So we will say scroll view grid.row is 1, grid.column is 0, and grid.column span is 2. And so this will give us, under this row of 60, it would give us everything that's left, and we'll take the entire width of this screen, of this grid. So in here, we have the forecast list. We don't necessarily need to fill this out yet, so this is fine. We do want our scroll view to take up everything, so vertical options, fill and expand. We can even give our stack layout kind of like a margin on the left and right, so it's not all the way to the edges of the screen. So margin, and we'll just say 20 on the left and the right. This is all of them, so let's just do 10 on the top and bottom. Okay, and so let's start applying some styles. So we have we can start by putting our styles here, and then once we see that we need to start reusing them, we can throw them in the app.xaml file. But for now, if you go right above this content page.content opening tag, you can say you can write content page.resources, and this is where we can define some styles. So in here, we're going to want to make a style, and target type will be label, and this will let us kind of access properties of labels while we're typing out the style. Let's give it a key so it has a name, and we actually, I think in app XAML we kind of did this already. Oh, just base label style will be dark gray and font size 16. So that's fine. Let's do that. We'll say so X key we will call very large font size, but no, just very large font, and it'll be based on our static resource, and it'll be the base label style. Okay, and now we can just override that font size property. So we'll say setter property is font size, and value is something large, 38. We'll start with 38. Okay, so that'll be our very large font, and this is something that could go in app.xaml because it's not necessarily specific to this page. But as far as my outline goes, I don't really have any pages that will use a larger font size, so we're going to leave it here for now. And then we need another style. Target type, oops, is still label, and X key will be very large font dark. No, yeah, dark is fine. Dark. And let's see if I already set that here. Text color, I did. So base label style is already a dark one, so we don't need this one yet. So we'll just get rid of it. So we're going to use very large font on the label we created down here for 50. So we will say style is static resource, very large font. And so that'll give us that. This is going to be all the way at the left. We might want to put a margin around it. We can wait on that for now. And so we can run this and kind of see what it looks like. It should be pretty basic. It's going to show what we expect it to show, is just Chicago, Illinois in the top left, probably pretty small font. And then we'll have an image, but you won't be able to see it because we don't have a source set in the top right. So that's not great. And then we will have a label, text size, text says 50, and it's, yeah. Okay, so it looks like we need some margins on our 50. We should define a font size for Chicago, Illinois, but it's okay for now. In fact, it should just maintain the the basic or the base style that we had in app.xaml. So let's apply a style to this real quick. Static resource, and this is base, which is fine. Okay, so 50 could even be bigger actually. So we might make this 38 like a 48. And then below that we'll have the forecast, and to the right, top right, we'll have that settings cog. So first thing we're going to do is grab that settings cog. We need that image. And so as long as you're not using this for commercial use, I think Flaticon is free. But you have to provide attribution for the author. If this is just for learning, it's totally okay. But we're going to need something like a settings cog. So let's see what they have. Oh, a whole bunch. So we can use, can't really use anything with a crown. I think this S is okay. Let's see what this says. S is not okay. Maybe it is. Okay, so we have this settings here. If when we do PNG, oh, okay. Well, I was pretty sure we were going to be able to change the color. Oh, you can here. Okay, so let's change the color to, all right, I have to log in. All right, let me try to remember my login quick. Okay, that worked. Login success. Um, and so we can still use this one, that's fine. And we can change the color to like a dark gray, I'm thinking. Not necessarily a black. And that looks fine. And then we'll download as a ping file, and 128 is fine. We don't really need it to be too large. And I have a folder for this already. So documents. Maybe I do not. Okay, I don't. So we can just put it in a new folder. We'll call it assets. And we'll save it as settings. It'll download. We need to copy this into all of our native projects. Right now we can put it into just iOS and Android. So we have to stop the project first. Then we can collapse the PCL. We have Android open. It needs to go into resources. And the right thing to do is to have different sizes for different screen densities. Maps are kind of newer than the drawable folders. All we're going to do is throw it in the drawable folder for sake of simplicity, but we will come back and talk about that because the right thing to do is have different icon sizes for different screen densities, and that's the way you can have the best looking pixel to pixel perfection app. So I downloaded that, I put it in this TMM assets settings, so we can copy and we'll paste it here. Okay, there it is, and then we will collapse that, go into iOS and paste it into resources. Paste, and it's there. Okay, so we have settings, so now we can say source is settings.png. And now if we run it again, I don't know how long it's going to take, but if we run it again, we should see that settings icon at the top. We should see, oh, we didn't change the font size here. We should have, we will. Then we can start using icons for like, is it windy? Is it sunny, rainy, snow? We can use icons for that. We can use background icons for like a city versus maybe like sunset or sunrise or things like that. You can get pretty creative. We can make like kind of like a a speedometer, but for the temperature and say, like when it's really cold, it can be blue. When it's that perfect temperature range, it could be green, and then it can get into yellow or red when it's hot. We could do a bunch of really cool stuff. Okay, 60 by 60, this 40 is enormous. And so I think it's the screen density on this phone, but that's okay. So we're going to bring that down kind of a lot. That's way too big. So let's bring this 60 by 60. Let's make that a 40 by 40. That'll bring it down quite a bit. We need to make our style from 38 to 48 to make that font size bigger. It needs to have a margin of, something kind of bigger than that. So let's give our grid some margins first. So our grid margin, and definitely 20 on the left and right, and nothing on the top and bottom. So we have that 48 here. So our okay, so this very large font, we're going to need to give the label 50 a margin. The left and right aren't so big of a deal, but that top needs to be something big like 40, and then maybe like a 10 on the bottom. So this is like left, top, right, bottom. So we'll do 40 top, 10 bottom, and we'll press the restart. And this should look a little better. Chicago, Illinois. Oh, we didn't. That explains 100% of what happened. Okay, so our settings cog kind of too far to the left, but I'm not worried about it now. We can move it over, that's fine. Chicago, Illinois, that's okay. The reason we don't see 50 is because we actually didn't put this in the proper row. So it needs to be in row 1, and the best way to do this is put them both in a stack layout so that they can't override each other. So stack layout, we still want to keep grid.column is 0, grid.row is 1, grid.column span is 2, all the same things as that scroll view, and our vertical options will be fill and expand. So all the same things as that. So these can go away. Keep vertical options, fill and expand on the scroll view, and then we can move the label and the scroll view down, move it into that stack layout, and it should format nicely. So we still have our 40 on the top, our 10 on the bottom, but this based on the stack layout, it's going to lay this out, then it'll put this under, beneath of it. So that's perfect. We have nothing to really scroll yet. We'll get into that shortly. But if we press refresh, we should see, maybe we should put a background on that first row so that, we can see the difference between the header and everything else. But here we go. Yeah, let's go ahead and add a background image. Not a background image, a box view. So we'll provide this a color, and that color can be, we can go into HTML color codes. Whoops, .info. Okay, and so from here we can just pick a color. If you want to really get granular, you can click this link, or you can go from here, but if you click this link, you get the old style one like you'd see in like Photoshop or something. But we want like a, I don't know, maybe like, oh, I can show you the Material Design Lite has this awesome color picker. We'll get into that later. I don't want to digress too much off of what we're working on now, but so I'm going to use 19B4B6, BC. Sorry, I copied and pasted, so can't really mess that up anyway. Okay, so that's the color. It's going to have a grid.row of 0, grid.column of 0, and a column span of 2. Okay, and that should take up the whole thing. Since it's being laid out first, then the label and the image will come on top. But now we have this problem of the label and the image both being dark, and we need them to be light. So maybe it would be best if our color, would a gray look okay on that? Maybe our color should be lighter. Like, now I don't really like that color. All right, this green, 68DEC2. Still isn't going to look great, but no problem. We can come back. So now if we press go, it should still be easy to read, kind of, hopefully. We should really take care of that, the margin thing we have going on. But, oh, and it's going to have border on the left and the right. Don't like that. Okay, so we're going to take care of that margin quick. That's easy. So let's not apply a margin to the grid itself. We will apply a margin to the label. So we gave it the base style label. We no longer want to do that. So we will come in here and make a new style. And target type will be label. Key will be header label. And based on static resource, and this will be the base label style is fine. But we want to change the font color or the text color, setter property and text color. And the value we're going to make like we don't want to change the text color because we made that light. And let's see how it kind of looks over here. I'm not a big fan. We'll keep it. Why not? So text color is fine, but we need to set margins on it. And so setter property margin, and your value is going to be 20 on the left and right, and 0 on the top and bottom. And we might as well align it. So property is vertical options, and value is center. And so if it was in a stack layout, that would definitely put it down here. Let's see how it goes in a grid. But that should help us with those margins there. So now if we come to this stack layout here, this stack layout, we want to have those margins on because on the left and right, because then we don't have to worry about it in here. So this stack layout, we don't need to apply margins to anymore. We can restart and we should look a little better. I don't really like the colors, but we're going to change it anyway. I think we're going to have a background image. So when this pulls up, our headers should be fine. Okay, that's okay, no problem. We have like our temperature. We're gonna need to put like an info text, like I don't know, like sunny or partly cloudy. So that'll go under this 50 label, and so this label will say like partly cloudy is fine. And then we're also going to need like an icon, maybe on the left of this. So what we can do is do a stack layout here, and its orientation can be horizontal. We can put these in their own stack layout because they're going to remain vertical or vertically. I guess we again don't need to do this because we have a grid. It's okay. But on the left of this, we're going to put that icon, and so it'll be like a cloud. But so this image is going to be width request. We can give it. We'll do that 60. That 60 was kind of large. 60, and the height request will be 60. We don't need to worry about the margin on the left. This takes care of like a auto 10 spacing. So we will do aspect fit again, and that should be okay. We need to give it a source, but we don't have one yet. And then we'll see the 50 and partly cloudy next to that. So maybe this margin can go on this stack layout, and then this should align nicely. So let's run it and see how that looks. There's this thing called Gorilla Player. Outstanding. So as you manipulate the XAML, you'll see the change live in the player. Super good. I don't have it installed in this computer. Okay, and so our icon will show up here. Let's go ahead and grab an icon quick. So we need like a cloudy icon, and this will get replaced by the ViewModel, so we don't have to worry about that. So cloud. Don't love that one. I don't hate it either. It's just a placeholder, right? Placeholder. Let's change the color to that is fine. All right, so download ping 128. It'll go same as here, cloud. That's fine. So we have to stop the project. We will go to our folder that has those icons, and we'll take the cloud, copy it, paste it into iOS resources, and Android drawable. And then if we go to this and say source equals cloud.png, now when we run it, we'll see this cloud next to it, and then below that we'll have the forecast. And now this time it's going to take a long time to run, I guess. Okay, here it goes. And so good, we see our cloud icon, we see it's 50 degrees and partly cloudy. We're in Chicago, Illinois. That'll get us to settings. We might make it to where you tap the city and you can add another one or something. Now below this, we're going to put a forecast, and the forecast, maybe the forecast and everything in this row will be able to scroll up. But that'll come with our custom view. But for now, we can start mapping this to the view model so that we're not seeing, everything's not hard-coded. So let's go to the view model, and we need a couple things. We need city, we need temperature, we need, I don't know what you'd call this, condition. That sounds like a great explanation. We also need an image URL or something, or if we have, our own images that's not coming from the service, then we could apply them here. But okay, so we need to start with a couple things. So above our I command, I like to keep like I commands, they don't have to be at the bottom, but they have to stay together. Well, I like that. Anyway, so we need definitely the city, so prop string, and you could say city. We're going to delete this because we have to implement the view model base, so get, and you could, I do underscore city, and then alt enter to create that variable up top, and then you can say set city equals value, and raise property changed name of city. Okay, city's good. We need temperature. Could this be like, are we going to show like 0.5s? This stuff should be a double, should it be just let's just make it a string. That's the easiest anyway. So string temperature, get temp, and set temp equals value, and then raise property changed name of temperature. Okay, we also need condition, so public string condition. This should probably be like current condition, but it's okay. All right, get, and this will be condition, and set condition equals value, raise property changed, name of, well, and condition. Okay, we need the condition icon, and that will be condition icon, set condition icon equals value, raise property changed, name of condition icon again, and that takes care of the components we have now. So we have city, temperature, condition, condition icon. So back to our homepage.xaml, we can start replacing some of these hard-coded values. So label with Chicago, Illinois, we could say binding city. The image with it that has the cloud, we can put binding condition icon. The label that has the 50, we could put binding temperature, and the label with partly cloudy, we can say binding condition. And so that takes care of all of those. So now if we rerun it right now, everything will be blank. But if we provide some fake values here, which will then get overrun by our mock service, but let's do fake values for now. So we in initialize async, we'll say city equals Chicago, Illinois, and then our temperature equals 50.5, and then our condition equals partly cloudy, using a couple capitals this time, doesn't really matter, and then condition icon equals cloud.png. So this is temporary default information to be replaced by services, and then mock services at first while we're testing. So if we save that and run it now, we should see everything should look the same, except partly cloudy will be capital. Okay, 50.5. Oh yeah, and there's a 0.5. Partly cloudy is there. We have the cloud icon, Chicago, Illinois. So everything looks okay. And so we are going to make the settings page, and then we're going to make it to where when you tap the settings icon, it goes to the settings page. Then you should be able to go back, and that should be good for today. Well, for this video. So this will be pretty quick. We can collapse our Android project and our iOS project, go into Xamarin tutorial, the actual PCL project. In pages, we can add new item, and we'll call this settings page. So we'll make it a content page. We will call it settings page.xaml. And then we will go into view models, and in order for this magic to work on its own, we need to use the same thing and then append view model to it. So settings page view model, enter. And settings page view model should implement base.viewModelBase. We will give it a constructor, which can be empty for now. And we will override the initialize async method. And that's fine for settings page view model. All we did was empty constructor, override, initialize async. And so we can close that for now because we're not actually going to be doing anything with that this video. Settings page, we will say welcome to the settings page. That's fine. Welcome to the settings page. So I just changed Xamarin Forms to the settings page. And now our view model locator. In the view model locator, we need to register that view model we just created. So where we have homepage view model, we will register with container.register. This is in the view model locator constructor. Register settings page view model, and that's fine. So once you get that done, you can close it. We can close the settings page. And in the view model for homepage, we're going to go into this I command and settings command. And from settings command, we need to make the actual action asynchronous. And so if you remember when we were implementing the view model base, it has its own initialized service for navigation service called navigation service. So we can just use it. We don't even have to do anything from the rest of our view models, which is outstanding. So async anonymous action, and then all we're going to do is say await navigation service dot. So did we not finish that? Go to definition, navigate service. Nice. Navigation service. Oh, did we probably I think we copied and pasted. We can do navigate service. That's fine. Navigate service. That's okay. So this will be await navigate service dot navigate to. I have an extra period at the end. So navigate to async, and what we're going to do is provide the type of the view model that we want it to go to, and this will be settings page view model. And in here we can apply some parameters or pass them. So like anything we wanted, we're not going to, but we could, and that's all we're going to do. So now if we run it, we should see our fully linked up view model to our home page. The settings icon should have a gesture recognizer, which will let us tap it and go to the settings page. Because we're using navigation service and it's got that custom navigation page, it should give us that back arrow automatically. I hate it because it's enormous, but it works. We press the back arrow, we'll get back to here. We press the settings arrow, we go to the settings page. And we have a lot of app theming to do, as long as custom views, because this all looks very plain. But it's a good start. So let's open up the notes real quick to go back over the plan. So custom screens, none of them are done. Home page is started. Settings page does not even considered started. Splash page still have more to do. So this will be a several part series for creating the screens. But basically working on the home page. Then this new user setup, we're going to wait until we have our designs done, because when you start walking the user through the app and showing them how to use it, it's got to be the app that they're going to be using. So new user setup will come later. API calls is probably where we're going to go next, because like I said, we have this default value that we're hard coding in the view model, but what we should do is be hard coding it in this mock service, because it's as simple as changing one line of code, and I'll show you where. In our view model locator, where we are registering these services, we have this update dependencies, and so we can start registering mock services, and all we have to do is change use mocks in our settings service, change it to true, and it will use these mock services. Then while we're developing, we can assume the kind of response we would get by making these service calls. Then when we're ready, we can just change that to false, and if we have our real services hooked up, then this will switch the services to register the real ones, and then every time we make the call on our side, the client side, nothing changes. We are getting the models we expect because we built it that way, but on the service side, it's just actually making API requests. So that's the benefit there. And we'll go back to our notes real quick. So that's probably where we're going to go next. So we're going to do these screens, not with full design. We'll do these screens. We'll do API calls so that we can actually finish the view models behind the screens. Then we can go into data storage, custom views, and all that stuff. So thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. Otherwise, like and subscribe, and hope to catch you next time.